I'm happy to have been invited here this morning to talk to you about these issues which are quite important for the rest of the country. I think it's important for Africa, for countries in Africa and for Africa as a continent to really warm up to the global compact, because we, more than anybody else, have enormous challenges ahead of us. Among others, there are serious perception gaps about our continent with regards to human rights, to corruption, to friendliness, to business, as well as susceptibility, or let me say, ability to attract investments. This is despite the fact that the facts themselves point differently. And in all of these areas, Africa as a continent has been outperforming many regions. And many African countries have likewise been outperforming many countries in other regions, confounding critics and foes alike about all of the issues contained in the global compact. But yet, because of the existence of Afro-pessimism globally, the truth gets discarded in the face of the often peddled lies and perceptions about who we are, how we are, and how we do things. So, the responsibility to provide leadership on all of the issues contained in the global compact face us perhaps more than anybody else. Because as I say, for us, it's not only the realities that we must contend with, it is also perceptions that are stubborn and will not go away easily. The South African economy was built on the back of the minerals energy complex, which makes it an energy-intensive economy. This imposes enormous responsibilities to what we do as a country and our heavy reliance on that minerals energy complex. The fossil fuel dependence, which has influenced our inability to industrialize our economy and diversify it. Because historically, we've had the comparative advantage of being able to build power stations directly above large coal reserves to generate cheap electricity at the expense of the diversification of the economy. We've been burning low-grade coal to supply cheap electricity. We've been heavily reliant on road transport and liquid fuels. We've had excess supply of electricity which we sold cheaply to bulk users. But these challenges are not unique to South Africa. For us as a country in Africa, to raise the profile of compliance with the UN Global Compact is important not only for ourselves, but for our continent. Because developing nations and emerging economies must continuously confront the tendency among developed economies selfishly to resort to self-interest and inward focus in the face of enormous global challenges. Such issues as are raised in the Global Compact enable us as the globe to face up to the global challenges and provide global responses. But the tendency, particularly among developed economies, is always to try and bail out and avoid global responsibility commensurate to their contribution to the problems faced by humankind. And so, the actions of each individual country and peoples and corporates is critical, because when added up, if everybody took responsibility at an individual level, we would then be able to add up to a global response. Through this vision of the UN and its Global Compact, amongst other things, we have clear evidence of international consensus that, amongst others, the environment does matter, and that the resources of the earth are finite, and there are consequences associated with irresponsible consumption. And so we should, as a country, take pride in the leadership role we are playing, the bold policy decisions we are adopting, as well as the bold steps we are taking to contribute towards this global effort. But the country itself is a sum total of different stakeholders and partners. Because ultimately, without the public sector, the private sector, the civic society, and different other players, there is no such thing called country. Because country can't exist in a vacuum. And so it's important that issues of the environment and sustainable development are put firmly on our national agenda as different stakeholders. To accumulate into what we will call a national response to all of these challenges that we are focusing on. The collaborative approach is premised on the notion of corporate citizenship, itself based on an aspiration that business will contribute to sustainable development and become part of the solutions. I think it is commendable that corporate organizations are now joining hands and balancing their rights in relation to their responsibilities, and at the same time are able to identify and take advantage of business opportunities in addressing complex social and environmental problems. For the developed world, making the transition, for example, to a green economy has its own challenges in respect of reorganization and new ways of thinking, because they are, after all, advanced. But for emerging economies such as South Africa, the transition will require the application of a fresh perspective, because jobs will be affected. We will require investment in research and technology and development. We will require innovative ways of production that will create decent green jobs and support socially driven enterprises with economic outcomes. So a sustainable future is non-negotiable if we are to meet socio-economic pressures such as poverty, unemployment, and inequality. And that is why I believe that initiatives such as these are so important for corporate organizations voluntarily to sign up to the UN Global Compact as a clear sign of their commitment to a sustainable future. There is a serious significance in positioning enterprises for global competitiveness through sustainable action such as this. To mention but a few, firstly, without such a pledge, there would be doubt about the credibility of the free market system. At a time when the global economic crisis has already posed a serious credibility challenge to the global economic order. So commerce and industry are no longer judged solely on their ability to make profit and create jobs, but they are also judged on the basis of their contribution to society and its sustainability. In a democracy such as South Africa, this remains a key asset for all. Secondly, excuse me, making this move is in line with the transformation in leadership which South Africa has been pursuing in the last decade. A more encompassing leadership style focused on a utilitarian approach or the common good and long-term sustainability may well become a norm in the future. So the move away from the traditional leadership style of being driven only by greed, short-term goals, and self-interest is indeed in the interest of those whom government seeks to serve and whom business seeks to also serve. So it's important that we should demonstrate the leadership in this regard and take the necessary steps to ensure that we mobilize not only our companies but the citizens as a whole to support such initiatives and participate in them. South Africa, because of the role we have played to democratize our country, has been thrust into a leadership role that we cannot avoid. Sometimes to the annoyance and irritation of some, but such are the vicissitudes of leadership. You can't avoid it because it irritates others that you are providing leadership. And so to make everybody happy, we must all sit back and say, let things happen as they will. Leadership is as such. It will invoke deep resentment among the lazy, but then you don't avoid providing leadership because of that. But thirdly, because we aspire to be a developmental state, we are a society that wants to address unemployment, poverty, and inequality, that seeks to achieve high levels of growth and development for the interests of all. There must therefore be a clear and unapologetic alignment of national interests, corporations, and balancing the economic and social goals in society. To achieve the meeting of the minds, which is so well reflected in our various policy documents such as the New Growth Path and the infrastructure rollout programs. So partaking in these types of initiatives would ensure that an organization's reputation is enhanced, and as such, the reputation of the country itself becomes enhanced. I believe that good governance makes good business sense and is more appropriate than ever. So as part of our commitment as the department towards these goals, and to play our part, to demonstrate our leadership, to make our small contribution towards this national alignment. Last week we got all the state-owned companies under our portfolio to sign onto the compact. In actual fact, all the state-owned companies in our portfolio have established their social and ethics committees, and we are now building that work into the shareholder compacts and the reporting framework of our department as the shareholder representative with our state-owned companies in our portfolio. The UN Global Compact is the world's largest voluntary corporate citizenship initiative. We believe that companies join the UNGC so that they can share the vision that business practices rooted in universal principles contribute to a more stable and global market and help build prosperous and thriving societies. We further believe that an outstanding feature of the UNGC, of being a member of this compact, is that it not only commits the company as a whole, but specifically its leadership, to prioritizing disclosing sustainability activities and policies, which is good for any economy, because it sends strong signals to the markets that the private sector is pursuing a long-term planning horizon. It will help our continent for all our countries to become active members of the compact, thereby advancing sustainable development. The significance of today's gathering is that it promotes the notion that social and national consensus is a critical pillar for the growth of our economy. And as government, we've been doing this through social compact economic policy interventions like the local procurement, the green economy, and skills accords. Our department takes pride in its small efforts in this regard, ensuring, among others, that our companies make the transition to a low-carbon economy, comply with human rights and anti-corruption measures, and are committed to broader sustainable development objectives and philosophies. I would like to encourage the CEOs of all the companies present here today to sign on to the UNGC. Because in so doing, you would be raising a hand in favor of a sustainable future for all. And you would be further partnering with those globally who are saying that we need to be responsible citizens and care about what will ultimately sustain our world and those around us. Because we need to be thinking about the future cogently and realize that the adage that we've borrowed the future from our children is not a lie, but it's a reality. So we need to partner as South Africans to ensure that we achieve these goals for ourselves. It's got nothing to do with anybody else. It's about ourselves, how we want to govern ourselves, how we want to be known, how we view ourselves, and what type of future we want for ourselves. Thank you very much.